So I finally got my hands on a rarefied Tacoma part that I've wanted for quite a long time. That part is a 4-cylinder specific gauge cluster with a tachometer built in with an OG mechanical speedo like my truck. So if you have a Toyota Tacomas ran from 95.5 to 2004 for the first generation truck. Now from 98 onward, your airbag connectors are different. Take all these screws out little by little. Always make sure you use the right size Phillips head screwdriver for these things, because you can easily damage the heads on these little teeny tiny Phillips head bolts, screws, whatever. Phillips head screws. Alright, so let's take these out. Okay, the tachometer screws are longer than the speedometer screws are longer than the tachometer screws. Keep that in mind. Alright, with that done, I should be able to remove this face. Yep. And here is the little mechanism for the odometer. Now, alright, so I'm going to have to take this out, and I realize I can't actually reuse the one that's inside my truck because I don't have this trip indicator, so I'm going to have to use this one. Unless I were to like take it apart and like hybridize this, but I can just make this read what I want. Now, there are legalities surrounding this depending on your state. Typically, people in the past, right, would take an older car, knock this back to look like it had less mileage so they could sell it for more money. In my case, I don't ever plan to sell my truck, and like I said, I'm actually adding miles, so it's not being done, for a fraudulent reason. And I don't ever see myself selling my Tacoma. If my son or grandson doesn't want to inherit it, or granddaughter, as it were, depending on what I end up with, well, bury it with me like the chariot of the pharaohs. Either way, I don't plan to sell it. So let's flip this thing around. Now, these screws are what's holding it in, right? So this one, and these two. So let's pop those out. Looking at the gauge cluster, I found something interesting here. So you can see these gauges are actually made by VDO. If you're in an old school car, back in the day, VDO made the coolest gauges for stuff. Having VDO gauges in your car was like a dope thing. Lamborghinis had VDO gauges. Alright, so based on what I understand, this little pin, right, has been popped in from this side and through this end. So apparently I can tap this pin out, and that will allow me to then spin the numbers, right? Obviously, I could put something in here and spin this forever until it reads what I want it to, but I don't have time for that. Or I'd have to figure out what kind of connection I need. You could just theoretically just put it in the truck and put the truck up on ramps and spin it, but it would take forever. I don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do, so I'm going to take this wooden block here and pop this sucker on here. Okay. Now, as you can see, the pin is right there. I'm going to put this on top of it. And I'm going to take a hammer and I'm going to just tap this out. hopefully that will work as intended. Moved. Sort of. Don't want to risk bending this assembly somehow or damaging it, because then I'd be screwed. So let's make sure it's supported a little further back, so I'm only tapping around the middle parts. Alright, I got that pretty much out. Oh my god, this little stupid thing is bending. Whatever, we'll fix that in a sec. See if I can grab this enough to move it back. Yes, I can. Alright, so I got this little pin free. I'll have to re-straighten this little metal tab as I kind of bent it. So I was hammering away at it. That's okay. Nothing flathead screwdrivers and love won't fix. Okay, so what I did now is I took out the two screws that were holding this on. That allowed me to pull this off, and hopefully I can reassemble this correctly. But that takes off the little worm gear that kind of locks that in place. So I'm thinking now I should be able to rotate this freely, and I can't. But at least now I can take a look at this mechanism and try to better understand it. Okay, I'm able to flip numbers by doing this. So maybe I've just got to rotate this over and over and over and over and over until I get the mileage that I want. Kind of sucks that there isn't. I saw some guy like somehow defeating this and making it click past and go, but he didn't really explain it well and didn't really have good quality video, so it was hard to tell. So I'm just gonna do this, unfortunately, until I get up to the miles that I need to be at. So it dawned on me this morning that if the odometer that I got in the new cluster comes undone from the trip meter, then it is very possible that the odometer that is in my current cluster would bolt to that trip meter and I wouldn't have to adjust that odometer. So I'm gonna test that theory, and in order to test that, obviously I have to take apart my interior and take the old cluster out. Now if you have a 95.5 to 97 Tacoma like mine, then taking this apart is pretty easy, and for the later trucks it's still fairly easy. It's just a little bit different, but I'll go through this. Mine is a little more complex because of this double DIN unit, because it has this lower piece that sticks out. It kind of makes this a little harder to pop out, but overall it's pretty straightforward. And you have a factory radio or a different double DIN that doesn't have this lower deck piece, I guess, it's a lot easier. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to kind of straighten all our AC dials, and we'll pop off these things. So I kind of like to leave them up on the dash in that little dip where we don't have an airbag, but 98 plus Tacomas do. With that out of the way, you're gonna need like a flathead screwdriver or a thin little pry tool like this. You're gonna come into this side, right? So you could probably do it with your nails if you have long enough ones. Ladies, all right, do that. That pops out. The AC thing will fight you a little bit, but there you go. That's out. We'll also put that up there. Now there are two screws in here. One is here on the right corner, so I like to put my finger under it just so that I can get the screw. If you have a magnetic attachment, that obviously will make it easier. Now there's one also kind of like back here, but it's up and at an angle, so it's right there at that angle. Same thing, put your finger on it, tug it toward the bit, and you got it. Now, having done that, the rest of what's holding this fascia on is just clips. So you can actually put a finger on either side like this and tug, and there you go. Those clips are undone. Now, for you guys, this will probably pop off easy. For me, I have to fight it around this radio, but that's okay. There we go. And it's off. Now, your emergency lights button is also in the way, so. And that was annoying for no reason. Careful taking that off, by the way. One of those brand new will cost you over 300 bucks at Toyota. And it's been over 300 bucks for years at this point, so I can't imagine right now what it would cost, but you kinda, there's no like quick release to this clip. You kinda just gotta wiggle it back and forth while holding the other side and yank it out. So with that out of the way, now I can start working on removing the fascia that's around the cluster. So the first part of that is getting rid of this lower tray. Now, how is this lower tray held on? Well, there's 10mm bolt here, right at the very bottom by your e-brake. There's another one up here. There's a 10 here, a Phillips head here, and another 10 down here. So let's get you guys a good view of that. Alright, so what you're gonna want to do is to undo all 10mm and the Phillips head that hold that lower dash tray on. So there's a 10 here, a 10 here, Phillips head here, a 10 down there, and a 10 up there. And it's difficult to get you a very good view of that. Alright, so as I said, Phillips head here. Pop that out. Now for the 10 mils. So the 10 mil way down here. You can see that little recession for it right here. That's that. There's another one up top here. You basically feel for it, you don't even have to see it. That's what I always do. Granted, I've done this many times, but that's okay. Alright, so that's up. Alright, so there's this one left. It's kind of a big 10 mil, but do this. Grab it. There's loose. Turn it. Alright. Now this is the tire. You take this out. Move stuff out of the way. Because now the tire thing should pop forward and come undone. Alright, so with that out of the way, now this stuff can start coming out. So first thing is I can mess with this and get it to pop out, but if I want to really have an easy time with this, right, like I got that, and I got to unplug this clock, which is this little white clip here, right? But now to really be able to get this out, it's a pain in the butt to do it with this thing on. So I've got to come from the bottom where the screws are for this and take this thing out. Not super difficult, but very annoying. So the holes for this are all on the bottom. You can kind of see them from the bottom. I'll show you. Alright, so like I said, there's a hole here, a hole here, 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 here. Those are all Phillips head screws. You undo that and you can take the bottom part of the column cover off, then you can take the top off, and then you can hit 2 screws that are up in here from this, and this whole thing will pop out. It's a bit of a pain in the butt. You can technically do this without taking this off, however, you really run the risk of breaking this, so I would never do it that way. So I'm just going to go ahead and take this off, and then I'll show you guys this part. Alright, so with those two out, I should be able to get this thing loose. Don't even really have to take the others out, just these 2 front ones I think are the only ones that grab the upper part. Now I'll tilt my steering wheel all the way down and kind of grab this. See if I can't just shift it. But now I'll take out the 2 screws that are here and I can pop this forward. Got one. Yeah, you can do those by hand if necessary. Now, this whole thing should pop out. This side's a little more tricky because it's connected there to the AC vent, but if you pull it forward, it should come out. I'm gonna do some work to get rid of this because it's gonna make my life a lot easier. Alright, so I ended up actually undoing the lower piece and I shifted this thing kind of over. Now there's just an electrical harness for the dimmer off on the left side. Really hard to get on. You just reach around and grab it and unplug it like everything else. That's undone. I should be able to tilt this and pop it out. There we go. Now, cluster itself is held in with a couple screws down here, a couple screws up here. That's really quick and easy to get. The only thing is, once you do that, you gotta pop this forward to undo the mechanical speedo connection, and then you have to undo all the harnesses that are along the top here in the back. Piece of junk can go back on. As always, keep a finger on it. Helps to have thin fingers for this. That's that. So now this can pop forward. You'll hear like a pop. That's that. Alright. Then there's all the little harnesses back here that you just kind of reach around, feel for them, and pop them out. There's another one. That's that. So it's the white, the blue, and the brown, and you just push up here, and you can pop them back. I ended up taking the entire speedometer unit out of the cluster like I did with the other one, same screws on the back. And this housing is actually the same as the one that has the trip meter. You can actually unbolt the trip meter and transfer it if you wanted to. Fortunately, there is a little gear that you need that's kind of like pressed in on the side, so you can't really transfer this to that, but you can unbolt the odometer from your existing cluster and bolt it on to the housing here, which is what I'm going to do right now. Kind of gonna fight the gear a little bit so it doesn't mash. There we go. I'll make sure that the worm gear slides into the little hole here. And now this is in place with my mileage on it, which is fantastic. Now I can pop this onto my new cluster, and my new cluster will have the correct mileage. It's pretty sweet. And I have a trip meter, which I used to not have. Alright, everything's connected, all the gears are in place, so let's pop that in. Alright, so I can now pack my odometer back into this thing. Just drop it in. And we gotta put the screws in through the back. Here with the little screws. Don't put a lot of pressure. Alright, now let's do bigger screws going here. And here. Much better. Alright, that's assembled. There's another slight difference that you need to account for, and it's these little things. You don't use them for this cluster. You do use them for the non-tachometer cluster, so you gotta take them off, and otherwise this thing will not sit down when it's supposed to. Okay, now it's where it needs to be. I can go ahead, reassemble this, and then we can go pop it in the truck. Alright, so let's pop those back on. There we go. Let's pop the needles on. Should be good to go. Alright, so let's get this little guy on here. This is, these have like a little stopper, a little stick that pops out and stops them. At least this one does. The other one's more on like try to fit it correctly. looks good. So let's assemble this cluster and see how it goes. I might leave it like this and connect it to the truck first just to see if I need to tweak the needles. And then if I have to tweak the needles, I'll do that and then pop the face on and reassemble everything. So here we are back in the Tacoma. I tested this thing out. It did work. I know the fuel gauge on these things rises kind of gradually. It never kind of rose all the way where I wanted it to, so I kind of pushed it with my finger. Just gonna put it in the truck and hope that it adjusts itself over time, and hopefully me having pushed it with my finger doesn't make it go crazy. So I'll just connect the 3 main harnesses, white, blue, and brown. Hilariously, if you have the later gauge clusters, they still plug in with the same harnesses, but nothing is wired the same, so it doesn't work. It's one of those things that sucks. Kind of like this brown plug that I can't get in unless I freaking... Now, the next thing that's probably not going to be great is, and even with the original cluster sucked, was aligning the mechanical component that connects to the back of the speedo. My best advice is to come through here with your hand and try to pop it in. That's what I've always done. I've removed my cluster in the past. Just realized I did something bad. I really should have swapped my LEDs. I'm gonna go do that and I'll be right back. So, just gonna reach around back here. This is always a bit of a pain. Grab hold of this mechanical component, pop it into the back of the cluster. Oh, I had it. There it goes. It's popped in. And with that done, now you can put all your screws in, put all of this together. It's the reverse of taking it apart, and I'm just going to patch that up and then show you guys what it looks like all assembled. Only other thing to keep in mind is when you're putting the fascia that goes over the cluster back in, you do have to line this annoying piece to the little AC vent in there, and that's just a matter of finagling it. And also, if you want, you can stick your hand up through the opening where the lid for the fuse box was, and you can adjust that. So it's not anything fancy. Alright, so as you can see, this thing is now fully assembled. So let's go ahead and turn it on. Emergency lights work well. Turn signals work. Tachometer, as you can see, doing its thing. Alright, looks like everything is working as it's supposed to. So I'm going to take this thing out for a drive and see how it does. I noticed the heat gauge go up earlier when I was letting the truck idle so I could let the gas gauge adjust. So I'm not particularly worried about that. I see the gas gauge, the fuel gauge has actually dropped a little bit. I don't know if that's a difference between the scale of the other one and this one, or if there's something I need to correct, but I'm going to drive around and hopefully that will allow it to change. Alright, so that was my cluster swap video. Now I'm going to go ahead and put my old cluster back together and leave it on a shelf in case I ever need it for anything. Now, only thing that I might have to do is at some point I might have to take things back apart and readjust the fuel gauge. I'm going to first try filling the truck up with gas and see what happens. If it goes all the way to full, then I'll be happy. But as you can see, my old cluster was reading pretty close to full. So I don't know that I trust the reading on the cluster right now, but not too concerned with that. If I have to take it apart, I have to take it apart, and that's life. I recommend you guys never touch it, and then you don't have to think about it. So in any case, if you've enjoyed this video, feel free to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you're notified when I post up another one. Definitely more Tacoma content coming. If you have any feedback, feel free to leave that in the comments section. And as always, thank you guys for watching.